The debate of analog versus digital has been around for a long time, whether you're talking about vinyl versus MP3 or tube amps versus amp modelers. The thing is, with wireless systems, so wireless microphones, wireless guitar, wireless in-ear monitor systems, there's a lot of misunderstanding out there of what the difference is between an analog wireless and a digital wireless system. So in this video, I'm going to go over what is the difference between analog and digital systems. I'm going to go over it as simple as I can in simple terms so that most people can understand it. And at the end of the video, I am going to give you a clear winner of which one is better. This isn't going to be a Quentin Tarantino or David Lynch ending where it's up to your interpretation, but there is a clear winner at the end, and I'm going to go over that. I'm going to explain how they work, and I'm going to go over who the winner is in 4 different categories. First, with frequency response. Second, with noise. Third, with interference. And fourth, with latency. So it is important to understand the differences between them, but as always, use your ear, whatever you like, keep using it. It doesn't matter what a spec sheet says or what some dude on YouTube is telling you. If you like your system, keep using it. And also at the end of this video, I am going to do a giveaway to one of my subscribers, and I'm going to give away a dual wireless system. So be sure to stick around for that. That's enough of the intro. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And let's go ahead and get started. First off, I do want to get one common misunderstanding out of the way. A lot of people think digital wireless automatically means that it's a 2.4 gigahertz or sometimes 5.8 gigahertz wireless system. That is false. A digital wireless system just means how the transmitter sends the signal wirelessly to the receiver. It does not mean that a digital system is automatically on 2.4 gigahertz. It can operate in those frequencies. The SHURE GLX-D is a great example of that. That operates in 2.4 and 5.8 gigahertz. But it all depends on the system. The SHURE PGX-D operates in the 900 megahertz. The SHURE SLX-D, QLX-D, ULX-D, the D in those stands for digital, by the way, all operate within 470 to 608 megahertz, depending on which system that you get. The Sennheiser EWD system, D also stands for digital, also operates within that same frequency range. I do have a dedicated video on 2.4 gigahertz. If you use any wireless gear on 2.4, I do recommend that you watch that video, but just keep in mind, digital does not automatically mean 2.4/5.8. You do have to just look at your system and see what frequencies they transmit on. So now that that's out of the way, how do they work and what is the difference between the two of them? So with any wireless system, the transmitter and the receiver need to be set to the same frequency, whether it's 2.4, 5.8, 512 megahertz, whatever you are sending it, the transmitter and the receiver need to be set to the same frequency. So an analog signal will transmit that signal via an FM radio wave, similar just to like an FM radio, just on higher frequencies. So one of the limitations of an FM radio wave, and again, that's just what the transmitter and the receiver use to send the signal and receive the signal wirelessly, but one of the limitations is that it only has 50 decibels of dynamic range. What is dynamic range? Dynamic range is just the amount of possible volume of the sound. So if, for example, you look at the SHURE BLX system, it says that the dynamic range is 100 decibels. So how do you fit 100 decibels of dynamic range into 50 decibels of dynamic range? Analog systems use something that's called a compander. What a compander does is when it goes out of the transmitter, it's going to compress the signal, send the signal over wirelessly, and then at the receiver, it's going to expand that signal. Compress the signal at the transmitter, expand the signal at the receiver. That's the way that they can fit that wireless signal into that limited 50 decibel dynamic range. If none of that made sense, it's okay. Just know that the signal needs to compress, transmit, and then expand at the receiver level. So with the digital system, it works a little bit differently, and it does not need a compander. So the transmitter is going to convert the signal into a digital signal, send that across, the receiver is going to pick it up, and then convert that back to the audio and the analog signal that you're used to hearing. So the signal is basically just sending ones and zeros. Because it's only sending ones and zeros, instead of looking like this, it looks just like this. If you want to find more about phase shift keying, which again, if I go over that, it wouldn't be a simply explained video, I'll have resources down below. Just remember that an analog signal needs to compress, transmit, and then expand again. And then for a digital system, it converts to digital, transmits, and then reconverts it back to analog. That is the main difference between the two of them and how they transmit. So what are the benefits of each of those different methods? That's what's most important. So first off is the frequency response. The full frequency response of human hearing is about 20 hertz up to 20 kilohertz, that's considered a full frequency response. Remember how I mentioned how an FM radio wave, the limitation is 50 decibels of dynamic range? One of the other limitations about it is that it's only able to transmit around 60 hertz up to 16 kilohertz. That's another limitation about an analog system. Now, digital, on the other hand, because it's converting it to ones and zeros and it's using a different method, digital wireless signal is able to send the full 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. The microphone might be different, your system might be different, but the digital signal is capable of sending all of that. And because the digital system does not need the compander, it doesn't need to compress, transmit, and then expand again, it gives it a more natural sounding sound. This is something that I think a lot of people get mixed up on, is they hear analog and they think it's warm and natural, and they hear digital as kind of like a fake sound or something like that. That is not the case with wireless gear. With digital wireless systems, you get a more natural sound, and with an analog system, you have less of a frequency response, and it has to compress and expand, which will color the tone a little bit. If you like the sound of your analog or digital system, that's all that matters. There's also the story of AC/DC in the studio, and they were recording, and they were like, something sounds wrong with the guitar. Everything's set up normal, except for the wireless. So they switched their cable out to a wireless, and they liked the sound of that better. If you like the sound of it, it doesn't matter what a spec sheet says. However, the digital system is capable of sending a more natural signal of how it sounds. And also do keep in mind, 60 hertz up to 16 kilohertz is completely fine, especially for me. I'm a guitar player and a D+ singer on my best days, but for neither of those instruments, I need anything lower than 60 or up above 16. For bass players or, 8-string guitar players who tune their guitars to drop R flat tuning, they might be able to benefit from the digital systems from hearing those really low notes because the digital system is capable of it. Digital is the winner here because it is capable of sending a more natural sound and a full frequency response. Okay, next category is noise. So before we go on, we have to talk about the noise floor, or the RF noise floor. So the noise floor basically is just the level at which your wireless is going to pick up unwanted noise. So I'm going to demo this on my Sennheiser system, and this one is really nice because it gives you an RF indicator right here. So you can see on 491 megahertz, I'm picking up some RF noise from somewhere. Something else is causing noise, and you can see that my transmitter is off. My transmitter is off, so it's not picking it up from there. And if I plug this in, you can hear how it sounds. This is how it sounds when I plug it in. Obviously, that's the sound you don't want to hear. I'm going to leave it plugged in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my transmitter. You can see that the RF signal goes all the way up. It is a very, very strong signal now, and that noise actually went away because the signal of my wireless is stronger than that signal of the noise. So does that mean that the noise is completely gone and non-existent? No, it's still there. It's just that my wireless system is picking up a much stronger signal from my wireless transmitter. And that's where we get the signal to noise, or the signal to noise ratio. You want the signal strength to be stronger than the strength of the noise. There's noise everywhere. You can hear noise from so many different things with wireless systems. It's just that the transmitter is so much stronger than that noise. There's also a very handy tool called Squelch on analog systems, which is basically a noise gate for wireless systems. So anything below a certain threshold, it just ignores it or mutes it completely. I do have a video going over that. It's definitely worth knowing how to use Squelch with analog systems. So with a wireless system, whether it's analog or digital, the closer the transmitter and the receiver are to each other, the stronger the RF signal strength will be, which just means it's a stronger signal. The wireless signal is very strong. You don't have to worry about dropouts. Now, the further apart the transmitter and the receiver are from each other, the less strong the RF signal strength is going to be. Every wireless system has a certain limited range you can go. You can't just go forever with your wireless system. Going further and further away, or putting people or objects in between the transmitter and the receiver, will cause the RF signal strength to decrease, and it's a less strong wireless signal. So the further and further away the transmitter and the receiver are from each other, the closer it's going to get to that noise floor. The strength of the signal is weakening, but the noise floor is staying exactly where it's at, so therefore you're getting closer and closer to that noise floor. What happens with an analog system is as you get closer and closer to that noise floor, that sound starts to creep in and you start to hear noise. With a digital system, however, it's actually really cool is that it doesn't matter how far you get away from it, you still get perfect audio all the way down no noise gets picked up until you hit the noise floor, and then everything disappears completely. As long as the receiver has any recoverable bits, so just ones and zeros, it's able to maintain clear audio. Once you hit that noise floor, though, then the signal just disappears completely. And I can also confirm this. I use analog and digital stuff. Analog systems are more prone to noise than digital systems. Digital is also the winner here. And next up is how well they do with interference, but I'm also going to call this spectral efficiency, or how many systems can you use all at once on the same stage or in the same area. In my opinion, this is the most important part about wireless. Obviously, we all know that we want it to sound good. In my opinion, most wireless sounds great already, but the more frequencies that you can use at once, the better. Now, if you only have 2 or 3 wireless on stage, it's probably isn't something to worry about as much. If you're playing in bigger cities, there's also a lot more competition to find that clear channels, but it really just depends on where you're at. So remember, a wireless signal needs to have a clear channel to transmit and receive on. If you're on 482.250 megahertz, nothing else should be transmitting on 482.250 megahertz. That space is taken. So an analog system actually suffers from something called intermodulation. Again, this is a simply explained video, so there will be more resources down below if you want to understand this. But in the same way you have harmonics with audio, you have your fundamental frequency, and then you have harmonics on top of that. The same thing happens with wireless. But what happens is if you have 2 analog systems at once, within the same area, you can get intermodulations on the way that those two interact with each other. So for example, if you had one wireless analog microphone system on 500 megahertz and then one on 505 megahertz, you actually get an intermodulation frequency on 495 and 510 megahertz as well. The way that you find that out, this is more in depth than you really need to know, but you double the frequency and then subtract the other one. So 500 times 2 is 1,000 minus 505 is 495. That's how you find that intermodulation frequency. And then you do the same thing for the other one as well. So now just having these 2 wireless systems transmitting at the same time, you now have 4 different frequencies that you cannot use. 500, 505, 495, and 510 all cannot be used because of the intermodulation. If it's not making sense, just know that the way the frequencies work is that it will cause other frequencies to not work. And there's a bunch of math involved, and I'll go over an easier way to do this here in a second. But that's just with 2 systems. It's actually pretty easy to do the math for that. What happens when you have 3 systems? Again, I will link to a video down below. There's a really good SHURE video that explains this actually. But if you have 3 different wireless all at once, those 3 frequencies cannot be used. And then the intermodulations that happen between those add another 9 frequencies that cannot be used for a total of 12 frequencies. So do you see what happens when you start using more and more wireless? There's less and less space to find a clear signal. The more analog wireless that you are using at once, the less frequencies that are available because of these intermodulations. And that is why it's important to have a wireless system that has more RF tuning bandwidth. The RF tuning bandwidth is just a fancy way of saying what's the range of frequencies that your wireless can find a signal on. So if your wireless transmits between 470 and 500 megahertz, that means it has a 30 megahertz tuning bandwidth. If it goes from 500 to 512, that's only a 12 megahertz tuning bandwidth. So let's say you have a narrow bandwidth like 12 megahertz. When you've added 3 wireless all at once, you've added a total of 12 frequencies that can't be used. So if it's an analog system and it's got a narrow tuning bandwidth, you're going to run into a lot more problems. And that's why you'll see when you look at a system, it'll say, don't use more than this many wireless all at once, especially with the cheaper stuff, because it often has a smaller tuning bandwidth. Now, do you have to do all this math every single time that you use your wireless? No, there's groups and banks. I do go over this in another video more in depth, but the groups will give you a bunch of channels that work together. The manufacturer's already figured out all of this stuff, and it will give you predetermined channels that work well with each other. If you did a scan and you found that group 2 had the most clear channels available, you would set one transmitter to group 2 channel 1, next one to group 2 channel 2, next one to group 2 channel 5. The groups are going to give you a bunch of channel recommendations that work well together, assuming you have the same manufacturer and the same frequency band. I made the mistake when I first started using that. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to put this one in group 1 and then this one in group 2 and this one in group 3 so they're spaced out exactly apart. That's actually the opposite of what you want to do. Again, check out my video on that. I'm basically just trying to tell you that you don't have to do a bunch of math every single time. Just use your groups and channels to your advantage. All right, so that's how it works with analog systems. What about with digital systems? What's the drawback with digital systems? Before I get to that, if you are finding this helpful, do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button. It truly does help out the channel, and consider subscribing. But what is the drawback for digital systems? None. Digital systems actually do not have to worry about intermodulation. Now, you still do have to space your channels enough apart from each other. If you have one that transmits on 500.100 megahertz, you can't just set the next one to 500.125 megahertz. Each wireless is going to need its own separate amount of space. It really depends on the system. But for simple math, let's just say that you can space them 1 megahertz apart for each one. So we're going to have one wireless microphone on 500, next one on 501, 502, 503, 504. With a digital system, you can do this. With an analog system, you cannot do that, and you're actually going to run into a ton of problems if you start stacking them because of the intermodulation. Every system is going to be a little bit different, but within a 6 megahertz tuning bandwidth, so let's say 470 to 476 or 500 to 506, but within this tuning bandwidth, for the most part, you can get 8 to 10 analog systems in this frequency range. That's assuming that nothing else is going on in that frequency range. With a digital system, you can get up to 60 systems in that tuning bandwidth. It's all going to depend on the system, but that's incredible, and that is so many more wireless that you can use at once. So you can look it up as well. Look up the Sennheiser EW500 system. I use this system all the time. I actually use it because I have a portable option, which is great for travel gigs and stuff like that. I have a video going over that if you're interested, but that is an analog system. But look up some of the specs on it. The bandwidth goes from 470 to 558 megahertz. That's a massive 88 megahertz tuning bandwidth to find a clear signal, which is awesome in itself. But they only recommend up to 32 channels at once. Now, compare that to the Sennheiser EW-D system. We'll stick with Sennheiser so that it's the same company. Theirs only goes from 470 to 526 megahertz. So that's a 56 megahertz tuning bandwidth, which again is still great. Anything over 40 I consider to be good. But they list up to 90 channels can be used at once within this frequency. So even with less bandwidth, the less options of channels that you can find a clear signal on, the digital is still able to do almost 3 times as many wireless at once than the analog system. Digital is clearly the winner here. There's no arguing this. It is so much better at spectral efficiency and finding a clear channel. All right, so the fourth category is latency. We got to give something to analog, right? We can't just give it all to digital. I'm going to keep this one as short as possible because this video is already long enough. Analog has very little latency, none at all. If it is, it's less than 1 millisecond. But digital is always going to have some level of latency. In order to convert it from analog to digital and then back digital to analog, there is always going to be a little bit of latency. But how big and how noticeable is that latency? So on most systems, on the higher end systems, it's listed at about 2 to 3 milliseconds. So SHURE, Sennheiser, Electrosonics, they all listed at about 2 milliseconds up to 3 milliseconds. Can you hear 2 to 3 milliseconds of latency? No, you can't. However, you can get compounded latency. So what if I was using my SHURE SLX-D system, which gives about 3 milliseconds of latency, and then I was using the electrosonic in-ear monitor systems, which have about 2 milliseconds of latency. That's 5 milliseconds of latency. You can't really hear that. The thing is you can get compounded latency. So if you're like processing your vocals through a computer or something like that, and it has to go through all of that, which will add latency, and then you're using a digital wireless microphone and then using a digital in-ear monitor system, you can stack latency on top of each other, and therefore you'll hear it. You're already struggling with latency. You don't want to add more latency into it. So analog is the winner here. However, you have to say, do I need to worry about adding 2 to 3 milliseconds of latency to my current setup? Most situations, I would say no, and therefore I think digital wins because there's so many more benefits to it. So I will have links down below to different systems that I recommend in both analog and digital systems. I do also have a wireless buying guide that goes from cheap to budget level to entry level all the way up to high-end stuff. It is definitely worth checking out if you are in the market for buying a wireless mic, guitar, or in-ear monitor system. And the thing is that basically every in-ear monitor system out there right now is an analog system. The only one that I've seen that is a digital system is the Electrosonics M2 system. I actually got to try this out at NAMM 2024. I do have a video going over 60 products that I found at NAMM this year. Trying these electrosonic ones out, they are really cool and they sound awesome. Because they're digital, they sound really good. They have the full frequency response and they're much more spectrally efficient and less noisy. But again, even after all of that information, If you love your wireless, keep using your wireless. Doesn't matter what a dude on YouTube says is better. If you enjoy the sound of your wireless, keep using your wireless. Keep in mind, there are multiple different levels of wireless systems out there, from super cheap to high-end stuff. Overall, the higher-end stuff is going to be better than the cheap stuff. Pro-level analog system is going to be better than a cheap digital system, and a high-end digital system is going to be better than a cheap analog system. But if you are looking for a wireless system, digital is the clear winner here, and I do think that that is worth looking into, especially if you're looking to buy or upgrade your wireless system. And again, there will be links down below to the systems that I recommend in both categories. So thank you guys for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor and hit the like button. I'm assuming that means you found it helpful. Hitting the like button is one of the best ways to support the channel. Feed the YouTube algorithm gods. I would sincerely appreciate it. Like I said I was going to do a giveaway to one of my subscribers, so I'm actually going to give away this dual wireless microphone system by Phoenix Pro. This is the PTU-2U. This is a great system, 2 wireless mics in 1 U of rack space. It is also true diversity. If you're interested in what that means, check out my review that I did on that product. It's a great system. I personally would just rather give it back to you guys. I'm very blessed that I get to check out so much cool gear. I'd rather give back to you guys because of how much the channel's grown over the last couple of years. I try to do giveaway as much as possible. So I'm going to give this away to one of my subscribers. Thank you guys again for subscribing and following the channel over these last couple of years. So in order to win the giveaway, 2 things. 1, you have to be a subscriber. So if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. And then second, you have to leave a comment down below using the magic phrase. You can say whatever you want down below. However, at some point, you just have to say the magic phrase. And the magic phrase for this one is going to be magic phrase. Someone actually left a comment on my other video saying magic phrase. Made me laugh, so I'm going to use that as the magic phrase for this video. The magic phrase to leave in the comment section is magic phrase. I will do the drawing this day and announce the winners. I forgot to mention this giveaway is just for United States. However, next week I will do a giveaway for anyone worldwide. But this week's giveaway is just for the United States. Please remember not to respond to scammers. Scammers will show up sometimes when I do giveaways. Just remember, I will never ask you for money. Period. I'm not going to message you and say, oh, you owe me for shipping. If anybody messages you pretending to be me and they start asking you for money, that is a scam, 100%, no questions asked. Please do not respond to scammers. Thank you guys again for watching. 2 videos of mine to check out. I do recommend you watch my squelch video, especially if you own anything analog, especially with in-ear monitors. It's a very useful tool to understand how to use. And also I do have a video going over 5 common mistakes when using wireless music gear. I made 4 of these mistakes when I first started using wireless, and I see them happening all the time. So check out both of those videos by clicking the links on your screen now. Thank you guys again for watching. Don't forget to like if you found the video helpful, and please consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you next time.